Tumbles living with nomads in the freezing wilderness of Siberia in half an hour on BBC Two after Summer in the Garden with Monty Don.
Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Now, the writing garden has become a lovely froth of white. And of course, like all white gardens, it's essentially green, just touched with white flowers. And the trick is to get that performing from spring right through to autumn if possible. But now in June, it's easy. It's just happening all around. And you have plants like this Silene, the white allium, Mount Everest, you've got the white foxgloves, all just really loving this time of year. Made much easier, I have to say, because we lowered the hedges last winter. That's let more light in and things are growing stronger. One of the side effects of that is, of course, we need more staking and more supporting, because either they need propping up so we can see them, or stopping flopping over smaller plants. Now, I'm here in the garden at Longmeadow all day, but Joe and Carol have gone to the Gardener's World live show, where they will be luxuriating in plants and the best of design.
I'll be looking at the show gardens for ideas you can take home for your own garden and some that you would only ever see at a show. And I'll also be genuinely soaking up the atmosphere. Lovely.
I'll be answering a few of your gardening queries and looking at some of the plants that are at their glamorous best in June.
And I shall be planting out melons in various ways, as well as trying to repair the damage that has happened to my Portuguese laurels. Come on. The Jewel Garden is a summer garden. It looks nice in the spring, but you always feel that it's limbering up. And now we've reached summer, it's really hitting its full song. In fact, it becomes positively operatic by the time we get to July and August. So these big pots in the centre have to compete with that. So I've got, for the summer display, plants that are really strong and really dramatic. Now, the first thing to do is when you clear out an old display at any time of year, is to refresh the compost. You can use any bought compost, but if you can add any goodness to it, it'll do it even better. So I've got some sieved garden compost there, some grit, and here I've got some sieved loam. Loam is essentially garden topsoil. The easiest way to make it is from turf. If you ever cut some turf, stack it face to face and leave it, and then cut down through it, and you get wonderfully rich soil, absolutely packed with organic matter. So if I mix up one spadeful of that, some grit, and then a very generous load of garden compost, mix that up. And what I have there is a nice free-draining but highly nutritious growing medium that anything ranging from an annual to a climber to a shrub will do well in. This is a Formium Blackadder, and I've chosen it because that chocolate purplish plum-coloured intensity is exactly the right foil for the other rich colours here in the Jewel Garden. And they like a free-draining soil with plenty of moisture. But they're very adaptable. They grow best in full sun, but they'll take a little bit of shade. They're really good if you're by the sea, because these thick leaves will cope with any amount of sea salt spray. They're almost completely drought-resistant, because once they're in and watered, they don't lose much moisture. So a tough plant, a dramatic plant, but you need something around it to set it off. And this is the Jewel Garden, so we need colour. Now, the first highlight that I'm adding is Bidens. This is a fairly new variety. It's called Orange Drop. It grows in a mound. It's vigorous, will reach about 12 inches, but you can see it also trails. And because you have these tall sprays coming out, it can take quite a lot of substance in here. Now, I'm going to put 4, which will be plenty for this pot. Don't overplant it at this stage. If you've got a small plot, if you cram them in, you'll have no room for anything else, and these will grow substantially bigger. And I really like the contrast between the rather delicate ferny foliage and these sword-like straps of leaves, and then the intensity of colour will keep flowering right through into autumn. I've grown this nasturtium, Tropylium cherry rose jewel, from seed. It's grown very easily, and I use nasturtiums a lot because they do give you that intensity of colour with a kind of looseness of growth. Now, it can be very trailing. You can even climb up, and they work really well in pots. Right. Now, the question is, will I need more than that? I got these Cosmos here, grown from seed. It's Cosmos Dazzler. Dazzler has this magenta colour. Pink is really tricky, but magenta breaks all the rules. It's crass, it's brash, it can hold its own, that's the key thing. It can take on orange and purple and these brilliant colours. And of course, growing from seed is really cheap. It's very easy and means that you have enough volume of plants to pack them in if you want to. To finish, may look like sacrilege, but I'm going to cut these Cosmos back to make them bushy, and then I'll get more side shoots and more flowers, because I don't want them really tall. Now, while I'm here at Longmeadow, Carol is at Gardeners World Live. And when Carol goes to a flower show, you know exactly where she's going to head for first. She is in the floor marquee, hunting out those treasures.
What a perfect day for visiting a flower show, and what a perfect flower show to visit. It's packed with colour and scent and plants, and the people who are daft about them. Now, on Gardeners World, we're constantly being asked questions by viewers about a particular sort of soil that they've got and which plants are really going to thrive in it. I've got one such letter here. It's from Karen Morant, and she's from Surrey, and she gardens on very alkaline soil. It's chalk, in fact. Well, she couldn't come to a better place than this. They specialise in plants that love chalk and lime. Well, the predominant plant on this whole stand is pretty obvious. It's the foxglove. These are nearly all forms of Digitalis purpurea, our own native foxglove, and they love living in those sorts of conditions. Digitalis purpurea is a biennial, so you need to sow it on 2 consecutive years. So you've got a constant supply of flowers, and they set seed and seed themselves around all over your garden. And mixing and mingling in with it is this beautiful plant. This is Cranby cordifolia. It belongs to the cabbage family. It's a brassica, but it produces these huge billowing clouds of scented flowers year after year after year. And being a brassica, it loves lime. The salvia family too are lime lovers, and this is a beautiful new salvia. I think it's adorable. It's called Blue Note. But to maintain that kind of shape and that production of flowers, you need to be trimming it back. And when you take off those trimmings, you can make yourself a few cuttings at the same time. Have you ever heard of the June gap? It's a term that beekeepers and gardeners alike use for that time during June when suddenly everything seems to be green. All the early spring bulbs have disappeared and the trees and shrubs that were in flower have finished. And it's before most of those perennials get going and before your hardy annuals really start to flower. But you've only to look at this stand to see that there are a plethora of beautiful flowers which are doing their thing right the way through June. Look at this Nepeta for a perfect example. Low-growing and packed with flowers. It'll go on for ages, and when these flowers finish, you just cut them down and it'll flower again. In the background, in complete contrast, are these tall spires of the Bascom Kynaston. All those flowers open in succession right the way up the spike, so it will go on giving colour and pollen and nectar for 6 or 8 weeks. And why not sprinkle in a few poppies? This is Papaver commutatum, the ladybird poppy, which will keep going through June and right through the summer. Well, most of us are lucky enough to have gardens in which to grow our plants. But for some people, that's not an option. All they've got is a balcony. We've had 2 letters, one from Anthony and one from Maeve, both asking the same question. How can we brighten up our balcony spaces? Well, one of the dimensions you can exploit on a balcony is height. So where better to come for inspiration than this wonderful stand with all these different climbing plants? And this one immediately takes your eye. It's Thunbergia Orange Beauty. Imagine that if you really let it rip. Or look at this gorgeous Arizona glow. It's already heading for the sky. Now, they're all tender, so you would have to protect them over the winter. But if you want something that's really on the hardy side, if you're gardening way up in the clouds on your balcony, then there are a few other ideas too. The plants that actually relish those conditions, because they come from mountain tops and hillsides, are alpines. And what's more, on your balcony you can grow them in pots and containers, and they've got everything. You've got sempervivums with these beautiful shapes, this fantastic texture. Or fill a pot full of a gorgeous dianthus like this raspberry cream. Scent and flower all summer long. Wherever you garden, whatever your situation, this show's got something to offer everybody.
We'll be going back to Gardeners World Live a little later when Joe will be having a look at the show gardens. Now, these pots need a really good soak when you plant them, and then water them generously once a week throughout the summer. Don't be tempted to give them little and often. It's not good for plants. Much better to soak weekly than sprinkle daily. Last year, when I visited Hyde Hall, the RHS garden in Essex, I was bowled over with the taste of the melons that they grow. Now, I've grown melons for years with great success as far as appearances go. Plenty of fruit of a good size, but the taste, I confess, has been very mediocre indeed. And I wasn't going to grow them this year because what's the point of growing something that isn't as good as what you can buy in a shop? But I'm going to give it one last go because I want to grow melons as good as they do at RHS Hyde Hall. So I'm going to try growing them as I normally do in a pot in the greenhouse. I'm going to grow some outside in a bed, and I'm going to grow some in a hotbed. Now, normally you make a hotbed in spring to produce earlier crops or crops that need more heat than the weather is providing. And of course, melons fit into that category. So this is an experiment. And I'm going to make them using the cold frames, which are now not in use because everything's out in the garden. But you can do it on open ground, as long as you've got some kind of frame to put over it temporarily to hold the heat in. But the one thing you do need is horse manure. And fresh horse manure generates a huge amount of heat as it breaks down. So you get fresh manure, and if you go to a stables, they're bound to have lots. And I know there aren't stables in every nook and cranny of every city in the country, but you'd be surprised about how many there are. And if you find a stable, the chances are they will be more than happy to give away some of the manure because it's a waste product, it keeps on coming, and they have to deal with it. So it may just be a car drive away where you can get a few bags and make a hotbed from it. Right, let's spread that out. Now, the next bit you do not want to do in your best shoes. And I'm looking to build this up to a compacted layer 12 to 18 inches high. So we firm that down. Right, that's the hot part. Now let's do the bed bit. This is what the melons will grow in. The manure is not part of the soil mix. It's simply there to act as a furnace to heat up the soil. So a layer of at least 6 inches and up to a foot you need on top. Now what I've got here is a mix of preparatory potting compost, leaf mould, garden compost and grit, but quite frankly, normal potting compost will do fine. Now this is Outdoor Wonder, grown strongly in the greenhouse, and I'm going to plant 2 in this size bed. I'll make a slight saucer around them because, as well as heat, melons need lots of water. If this was March or April, I would leave the hotbed for at least 3 or 4 days and up to a week to warm up. Otherwise it'd be too cold for the melon seedlings. Because it's June, it can stay warm, I can close the lid at night if it gets cold, and gradually it can get hotter. Now, in pursuit of the perfect melon, I'm going to sow 3 or 4 alongside the courgettes that I planted a few weeks ago. And I'll also grow some, as I always do, in a pot in the greenhouse. When you're growing them in the greenhouse, just remember you need enriched compost, a nice big pot, and as hot and as wet as your greenhouse can provide. Now these will go in one here, like that, and I have one over there. I have to say I have no great expectations for these outdoor melons because we are considerably colder than Hyde Hall over on the East Coast. But I'll give it a go. Even if you're gardening in the sunniest, warmest part of the British Isles, if you're planting melons outside, harden them off for at least a week outside before planting them out. It's too much of a shock to go straight from a greenhouse into an outdoor bed. Now, you might not be considering growing melons anywhere in your garden, but here are some things you can be doing this weekend.
As strawberries ripen, it's important to keep them up off the soil. This both protects them from being splashed by grit and also stops them sitting in cold, wet ground and being prey to slugs. The best way to do this is the traditional one, using straw. And you can buy straw in bags from pet shops. And it's important to lift the fruit and place them on top of the straw rather than burying them. Broad beans have been growing rather slowly in cold spring, but they've now picked up and are producing pods and rapid new growth. However, this means that they do have a tendency to collapse. So use layers of string to hold them upright and make them much easier to pick. Tender perennials like cannas and dahlias have needed protection until the last risk of frost is over. But we've now reached that point, so you should get them out into the garden as soon as you can to give them a good long growing season. They do like sun, but it's heat that matters. The summer heat is now here.
The mound is made up of 25 years of garden waste, subsoil, stones, and it's accumulated. And a couple of years ago, I thought that we could make a wildflower meadow, and that's quite a gamble because this is heavy soil and it's a wet area. And normally you do it on light, thin soil. Now, it didn't work. It was a good experiment, but it had none of the elegance you want from wildflowers. So I've cut my losses, taken it out, and we're starting again. Kept the basic structure. And at the end here, I'll extend the bricks and we'll have a seating area with columns rising up with climbing plants. And these will become beds filled with scented plants. And then down on the lower terrace, lots of pots, also filled with scented plants, and somewhere where we can come of an evening, sit, perhaps drink something refreshing, and look back on a day in the garden. Now, one of the great things about gardening at home is you discover the best design. You work towards it, sometimes over a period of years. But obviously at a show garden, at a show, has to be dead right first time. And Joe has been looking at the show gardens at Gardeners World Live just to see how right they are.
Had a good snoop around, and there's some great design ideas at this year's show. And, you know, a lot of people have a problem with that rectangular garden, with the rectangular lawn. How do you get away from that? Well, this garden is called the Flow Garden, and it does it brilliantly. A simple design technique that's so effective by putting the design on the diagonal and losing that rectangular feel. It draws the eye into key areas. So, as you can see, it's got a strong layout, but what I like is that actually it's been picked out three-dimensionally. So we've got something like this decking that turns into a bench, and then a bit of hedging that also works, creating the structure of the garden. The materials are all working together. There is no one single feature here drawing the eye in. The eye moves nicely across because the details are absolutely perfect. And the planting isn't too dominant either. We've got a simple palette. Things like the bronze foliage of the Formium and the Carex grasses are working with the browns of the decking, and plenty of green too. So really everything in this garden is working together. And that's the absolute key. And that's why the judges gave it a gold medal. Just enjoying a nice little shady spot in this garden, away from all the busyness outside. Now, this is a very traditional layout, this garden. It's not breaking any barriers design-wise at all, but it's got everything you need in the garden. It's got a greenhouse, it's got a paved seating area, it's got a little bit of shade. But what I like about it is the planting areas are really generous, so you can pack loads of plants in here. Now, the plants themselves are a little bit packed for a show garden, and there's some that, you know, don't associate too well. Something like the Sisyrinchium and the Hosta wouldn't grow together. The Sisyrinchium likes dry and plenty of drainage, and the Hosta might like a little bit more moisture. But obviously, you could plant anything you wanted into this garden. I'd have a cutting garden for flowers. I'd have a veggie area, plenty of herbs, and maybe some winter stems towards the back. So you could pretty much stamp your personality with plants all over this plot. This garden caught my eye. It's designed by Paul Harris, who you might remember from the Chelsea Garden Challenge. His brief was to create a low-budget garden with wow factor. Paul, lovely to see you.
Yeah, you too, Joe.
Congratulations, you got a gold medal on your first proper show garden.
Oh, fantastic. I'm so delighted. I really didn't expect that. But yeah, first show garden outside of the Great Chelsea Garden Challenge.
Yeah, there's some lovely... I love your sculptural pieces here. I mean, black. I mean, people are scared of black, but it does work, doesn't it?
Black works great against the, you know, the bright greens of the grasses and the fennel. And then, yeah, I wanted to create a piece of homemade art. So using the bottoms of these wine bottles, which I very much enjoyed consuming, I then stuck them in there. And I think it's really effective and casts some nice light.
Yeah, and when the light comes through, and also you've you've got a little sort of bug house as well.
Yeah, the little bug shack. Yeah, so yeah, that was just cut up canes. It's all very easy, and glued those in.
And relatively cheap.
The whole garden is a low budget or modest budget garden, and I've done it for £5,000,
which is very good for a show garden.
Yeah.
I love this bit of planting here behind me.
The steeper with the bird bath. There was an element of upcycling, so grandmother's bird bath made an appearance.
You've stolen your grandmother's bird bath and brought it to Gardeners for Life. No, I love it with the Cirsium here, the Cirsium rivulari. It really works beautifully together. It sort of sets the tone for the rest of the garden.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, congratulations. Really nice to see you here.
Yeah, you too, Joe.
This is Solihull's Neighbourhoods in Bloom garden. And no, it's not high-end garden design. It's a bit of fun. This is a show, after all. We've got every room in the house in here. Let's see what's on the telly. Oh, Gardener's World, my favourite. Brilliant. Right, heading over to the kitchen. What have we got cooking? Toast nearly finished. Yeah. Oh, looks like it's going to be vegetarian tonight, everybody. Is that all right? Yeah, great. I'm going to have to leave the washing up to you, though. Sink's full of rhubarb. Bedroom? Definitely a girl's bedroom, this, definitely. Oh, I fancy a lie down, but I don't want to crush all the Cape daisies over there. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there in the bathroom, excuse me. Oh, someone's left something floating in the loo. Oh, that's all right. It's a dwarf water lily. That's fine.
Come on, where's your bag? The show goes on till Sunday night, and I'm going to be there all day Sunday. And if you want to come along and want details about tickets, then you get everything you need from our website. Over the last 5 years or so, I've noticed a huge increase in fungal problems here at Longmeadow. Some of that is due to increased growth and therefore poorer ventilation. Now, that's manifested itself in box blight, which you can see here on the box balls. And now it's manifested itself in these Portuguese laurels in silverleaf. Now, silverleaf will hit the whole prunus family. That's plums, cherries, and Portuguese laurel amongst them. What happens is the top of a leaf separates a little bit from the main body. But much worse is that it dies back. The effect is really quite dramatic. Now, the damage to this tree is really getting quite considerable. What I have to do is cut out all affected material. And the time to do it is June, because in June, early July, that's when the risk of spreading it is at its lowest.
If you suspect that one of your trees is ailing, it is a good idea to seek advice from a tree expert, as problems are notoriously difficult to diagnose.
Now, up here, we can see we've got dead branches. So I'm going to cut that back. And if this is silverleaf, the wood should be stained a dark brown. Yeah, look at that. That's pretty conclusive. The wood's stained, it's dyed back. We have the silvering of the leaves last summer and autumn. I think that's 99% certain silverleaf. Now, I think I can save this tree by cutting it all out. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut out the dead material, reshape it, and with any luck, we'll get through this. But it will take a little while, certainly longer than we've got today. So that's it for this week. I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next Friday with freshly pruned prunus. Till then, bye-bye.
Gardener's World, the Veg Growers Almanac is available now from BBC Books. Or from the summer garden to Siberia's frozen wilderness next on BBC Two, Kate Humble's Living with Nomads against the bleak beauty of the tundra.
As you've never seen it before.